Thank you very much. Thank you for the lovely introduction and welcome. Lovely to see you here. I'd like to start by saying thank you to Bilgi University and to the British Council for inviting me to be with you today. I'm delighted to be back in your beautiful country and particularly in Istanbul. It's one of my favourite cities in the world. So thank you very much. My talk today is about continuous professional development and the choices that we have open to us as professionals and as teachers. The reason I'm talking about CPD is that I believe it helps us to think critically about the ideas, the materials, and the technology we're confronted with on a daily basis. It helps us to understand the context of the work we do and to choose the best methods and approaches for teaching in that context. Developing professionally is crucial to our work as educators. So here's what I'll be talking about today. First of all, I'd like to give an overview of the nature of what I believe is the nature of change and innovation in ELT, and to start to think about how CPD can help us with that. I'll then go on to talk about CPD itself, what is it, and why is it so important. And finally, we'll talk about some kinds of CPD that are available to us as teachers. I'll give you a little time to reflect after each part of my talk, and there will be time, I hope, for questions at the end. But first of all, I want to tell you a story. The lady who introduced me said that I came from Vancouver, and this is the place that I live. Some of you know this. I live on the west coast of Canada, very close to Vancouver, and as you can see, it's a very beautiful place. It's full of wildlife, you can imagine. It's full of bears, it's full of coyote, raccoons, all kinds of things. And the bird life is fantastic too. You might see this fellow, for example, very close by. This is one of our close neighbours, the eagle, the bald eagle. So today I'm going to start with a story about an eagle. In fact, it's a story about a chicken and an eagle. So there was a chicken farmer who was a very keen rock climber. One day, climbing a particularly challenging rock face, he came upon a large ledge. On the ledge was a nest, and in the nest there were 3 large eggs, eagle eggs. Now he knew that it was distinctly unecological and undoubtedly illegal, but temptation got the better of him, and he discreetly put one of the eagle eggs in his rucksack, checking first to make sure the mother eagle wasn't around. Then he continued his climb, drove back to his ranch, and put the eagle egg in the hen house. That night, the mother hen sat on the huge egg, the proudest chicken you ever saw. And the cock seemed pretty pleased with himself too. In the fullness of time, the egg hatched and the baby eagling emerged. It looked round and saw the mother hen. "Mama," it squawked. And so it was that the eagle grew up with its brother and sister chicks. It learned to do the things that chickens do, clucking and cackling, scratching in the dirt for grits and worms, flapping its wings furiously, and flying a few feet into the air before crashing to earth in a pile of dust and feathers, and believing, above all things, that it was totally and absolutely a chicken. One day, the eagle, who thought he was a chicken, happened to look up at the sky. High overhead, soaring majestically on the thermal currents, flying effortlessly with scarcely a beat of its powerful golden wings, was an eagle. "What's that?" said the eagle in awe to his farmyard neighbour. "It's magnificent, So much power and grace, so much poetry and motion. That's an eagle, said the chicken. That's the king of the birds. It's a bird of the air. But we're only chickens. We're birds of the earth. And I just want to stop my story there, and I'll come back to it later, because right now I want to move on to the first part of my talk and talk a little bit about the nature of change in ELT. Well, here's a story of change. Here we have a young teacher. I think this was taken probably about the time that Guy Cook was in Egypt. Looks very happy, smiling, dancing, full of the joys of life. And here's that same teacher a little bit later, still full of the joys of life, perhaps not quite so young. So I've had a 30-year career in ELT, and in that time, as you can imagine, there's been a lot of change. Here are some of the different methods and approaches I've encountered during that time. I've encountered them, I've learned about them and used them. They all represent different ways of thinking about how we learn languages. And at one time, they were all the latest thing. It seems to me that we've always lived through times of change. As Weddell and Malderis say in their new book, Understanding Language Classroom Contexts, changes as to how teachers are supposed to teach, what they are supposed to teach, what resources are available, and what learners are supposed to achieve through their teaching, rain down on us with bewildering speed. Here's something that may be familiar, and language laboratories are still used in many places in the world. In the UK, they were used when I was at school. We used them a lot. We sat in language laboratories for many hours every day, repeating French phrases such as Est-ce que j'en mange l'orange avant le fromage? Non, j'en mange l'orange après le fromage. And things like that, very useful things like that. But you see, I remembered it, so that's good. But they fell out of favour in the early 90s when audiolingualism fell out of favour as well, leaving every school in the UK with a very expensive but unused piece of equipment. So here are some of the technological innovations that I've seen, just some of them. And some may be here to stay. Some of them have gone already. So in my 30-year career in ELT, there have been many changes, as I said. Changes in methods, approaches, technology, materials. We seem to be in a profession that readily embraces new ideas, which may be a good thing. But I feel that we do have to be careful that we're not just adopting the latest fashion without subjecting it to rigorous pedagogic scrutiny. We may be changing, but the key question is, are we actually doing it any better? This is Dr. Richard Smith of Warwick University. He is an ELT historian, and this relates a little bit to what Guy was talking about this morning. Speaking recently in a British Council seminar, A Short History of ELT, he warned of the assumption, which is prevalent in our profession, that anything new is good, and by definition, anything old is bad. And he talked about the myth of perpetual progress. He said this. So his belief is that if we understand a little bit about the history of VLT, it does help us to be more critical and less accepting of all these innovations. We're more empowered. We know more about things. And he used this phrase, on what they're being sold. In the face of all this change, what are teachers to do? How do we decide what is temporary and what's here to stay? How do we hold on to the timeless principles of what makes good teaching and learning? This is Penny and she was speaking recently in Liverpool at ITEFL. and she gave a talk on technology in the classroom. It was called Technology in the Classroom, Tools to be Used Cautiously, Critically and Selectively. It was a good talk, but I think these three words, cautiously, critically and selectively, need to be applied to any new method, approach or new technology. We need to be cautious, we need to be critical, and we need to be selective. I agree with Scott Thornbury when he says this. The references will be on the blog, by the way. This is from his blog. I believe that the ability to think cautiously, critically, and selectively finally comes down to us as practitioners, to our training and to our experience, and to the extent that we empower ourselves through knowledge. My 30-year career in ELT has taught me to agree with Heraclitus, who was already mentioned this morning by one of the students, that change is a constant. In fact, it's the only universal constant. But if change is inevitable, growth is optional. Michael Fullan writes, "The secret of growth and development is learning how to contend with the forces of change. It's not possible to solve the change problem, but we can learn to live with it more proactively and more productively. Teachers' capacities to deal with change, learn from it, and help students learn from it will be critical for the future development of societies," Fullan says. Well, I believe that, like a study of ELT history, continuous professional development can help us as professionals to think cautiously and selectively about methods, approaches, materials, technology that confront us. CPD gives us the confidence to have a more critical, more empowered perspective on what we're doing. Professional development helps us to understand what our own beliefs are about teaching and learning. It helps us to keep a steady course through the stormy seas of change, and more important than anything, it helps us to keep our focus on how we can get our students to learn best. Now, I've said a few things about change, and I'm just going to give you a moment or two to reflect on those things. You can reflect generally on anything that's resonated with you, or you can reflect on the changes in your career so far, and maybe have a chat to your partner. I'll give you a couple of minutes. So, So we've talked about change a little bit and how we need to be critical of change. The next part of my talk is about CPD itself. What is it and why is it so important? Goes further into that. So here are a couple of definitions of CPD. First one just from Wikipedia. The second one from the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors. And you'll see that one, I find that one quite interesting because it adds to this issue of the skills and knowledge and professional competence that's part of CPD. It adds this element of achieving our true potential. Achieving our true potential. And I believe that at its best, CPD helps us to do that. It's about lifelong learning, what Rod Bolitho has called a career-long process and not just an event. It can be formal and informal. Formal in the form of training, courses, degrees, all that kind of thing. But the best CPD is often informal, and it happens when teachers come together to support each other. This is my trainee, and she's a teacher and trainer from Iran. Her name is Samira Hazari, and she was speaking recently at IATEFL at the Hornby Scholars presentation. The presentation was on becoming an effective teacher. She made the point that teachers need to be provided with the tools of lifelong learning so that they can support each other. Teachers, she said, are the ones who know their own needs best. They can learn by sharing and motivating each other. Reflecting on their own practice together, teachers will become confident in making their own decisions. Confident in making their own decisions. Or, as Schoen noted, we actually learn from reflecting on experience, on action, rather than learning from research and theories. CPD at its best is localized and it takes context fully into account. In my longish career in ELT, I've visited many countries and many different classrooms in the world, and they're all very different. There are many things that unite us as teachers, but there are many differences in the way we work. All learning contexts are different, even in this globalized world. Students are different, class sizes are different, cultural expectations, national cultural expectations, local cultural expectations, materials, access to resources, all these things are quite different. So it stands to reason that CPD will be different in different contexts. It depends on our experience often. It may depend on how long we've been teaching. This is the British Council's stages of professional development. Where are we on that ladder? What kind of challenges do we need? We may be a teacher who's been teaching a long time, or we may be a teacher who's just starting out. And there are some of you here who've perhaps not even taught yet, but have been teaching just a few months. But for all of us, CPD means these things. It means not standing still, knowing where we are, where we want to go and how to get there, being a learner. And finally, and most importantly, as Samira suggests, being in control of our own path. So CPD is about localized needs, about choosing our own path through choice, personalization, self-direction. And the heart of it is reflection. Yeah, so reflection on practice. We have a number of models that we can use to reflect on practice. We have Kolb's famous 1984 experiential learning cycle. And he suggests that we describe experience, reflect on it, make sense of it through reading and through knowledge building, and then adapt and try again. The Gibbs reflective cycle 1998. It's got 6 steps, and this is quite an interesting one. I think it adds a couple of interesting elements. So description, what happened, feelings, how did we think and feel about that situation, evaluation, what was good about it, what was bad about it, analysis, what else might you make of this situation, conclusion, what else could you have done, and importantly, an action plan, what will you do next time. And yet again, there is the Rolf model 2001, which has just got 3 steps. So for the minimalists, very nice. What, so what, and now what? So describe the situation, discuss, knowledge building, a little bit of theory perhaps, and then now what? How are we going to improve the situation? That's all very well, but how do we use these models in our everyday practice? I'm going to give you that question actually. How can we use reflective models in our everyday teaching lives? And I'm going to give you a minute just to chat to your partner again and come up with a couple of ways that you might use one of these models in your everyday teaching or your development. Reflect. Okay, so Hope you came up with some thoughts on that. Here are a couple of thoughts I had. Obviously, we can use it in our teaching journal to use it as a framework to reflect on a lesson or lessons during the week. We can meet with a colleague for a weekly sharing of reflections and use one of the models as a tool to reflect with. Because, you know, sometimes it's useful to have that kind of tool. Otherwise, it's, you know, we reflect on, yeah, there's no framework. We can use, use one of the models for a TA meeting, perhaps, or for an inset session. So again, using it as a discipline. Or we might use one after an observation with a peer, with a critical friend. We can use one of those models to reflect on the lesson. So there are ways of using them. Maybe you came up with lots of other ideas, in which case you can tell me over lunch, perhaps. So continuous professional development, we've said, is important for a number of reasons. It can give us the knowledge and tools to be appropriately critical of change and innovation. It empowers us at its best, and it gives us the confidence to say that we are the ones who know our own context best and what works there. I want to move on now to the last part of my talk about the kinds of CPD we can choose from. In 2012, Catherine Walter and Jessica Briggs, this is Catherine Walter, looked at 35 evidence-based studies of professional development. And they asked this question: what professional development makes the most difference to teachers in terms of their skills and in terms of the results for their students in the classroom? And they came up with a number of items. Firstly, that it's concrete and classroom-based, that it comes from the classroom. It can bring in expertise from outside the school. It involves teachers in the areas that they want to develop. So they are involved in the choosing of them and the activities themselves. It enables teachers to work, to share and to work collaboratively. It provides opportunities for coaching and mentoring. It happens over time. It's not just a one-off event. And it's supported by effective school leadership. So this is, again, part of, in the references, and they'll be on the blog. Quite an interesting little study. I'd like to look at two of these areas. The first one, concrete and classroom-based, and the fourth one, working collaboratively. And then I'm going to add one of my own, which is that of providing challenge, because I think at its best, CPD needs to provide us with challenge. And it's an overarching theme, I think, of development. So let's think about concrete and classroom-based. What kinds of activities can we do to develop which are concrete and classroom-based? Well, of course, we can do things like videoing ourselves, working with a critical friend, working with a peer, or working alone, deciding on something that we want to improve, looking at it before and after, thinking about criteria, can be very, very helpful. We can try using a completely new technique, something that we've never tried before, something that we see at a conference like today, or something that we read about, see online. Try it out. We can do things like investigating our classroom through some kind of practitioner research, for example, action research. And of course, we can do things like observation. Observation is not used enough, in my opinion, and it can be really helpful, peer observation or even unobserved observation, to help each other, critical friends, to develop. I don't know if you've come across unobserved observation. This is a basic format for it. But basically, you have two teachers working with each other, working as critical friends, helping each other to develop, working with the teacher's agenda, and the observer merely helps the teacher to reflect on the lesson before and after. This is very nice, especially in situations where you can't actually get into other people's classrooms for organizational reasons, or in cases where people are very nervous about being observed. It's great. I want to make a call out here for Julian Edge's book called Cooperative Development. It's quite an old book now. It's on my reading list. It's really, really good. It has lots of this type of exercise in it, where colleagues can help each other in pairs or in groups with self-development activities. So cooperative development. What about sharing and collaboration? Well, you know, lots of different ways that we might collaborate. Through a staff room group, obviously, through a local group if we have one, joining a teachers' association, starting or joining a professional reading group. So read an article every 2 weeks, talk about it, read a chapter from a book and talk about it, joining one of the millions of online communities that there are these days. Teachers' associations particularly can be a wonderful way of developing professionally. This is Hinsa Hadush from Ethiopia, and Hinsa was also talking at the Hornby presentation at ITEFL recently. And I just wanted to play 2 minutes of Hinsa talking about his local teachers association, the Addis Ababa Teachers Association, because he's very passionate about it. So I want you to listen. I hope you can understand some of it. I'll help you with it afterwards, if not.
This association, Addis Ababa English Language Teachers Association, and I'm a member of this association. So yeah, it's true. Associations can really help in many ways for teachers to grow professionally as well as personally as well as professionally. So in my association, what do is we just meet. I'm trying to be short enough because you can list a number of benefits that an association can provide to teachers for them to professionally grow. So on top of what has been said, I'd like to focus on the professional sharing sessions we do in my association. What do is teachers meet every fortnight on Saturday mornings, and we bring our success classroom practices and failure classroom practices and then share, reflect on those practices. So what went wrong in my class last time? I just tell it my friends, and then what went success in my class last time, I just bring it to the table, and then we share among ourselves. And what that really produces, that's what really means is, for me as a teacher, it really gives you the opportunity to become a more reflective practitioner. So, and also I personally believe, ultimately it's up to the individual practitioner to make their own professional development. So as we practice, it is simply like being the best teacher of your own. You're teaching yourself very, you don't need to invest money, you don't need an expert. When you reflect, you're teaching yourself. So overall, if I am asked to evaluate, to assess as to what contributed to my professional development, I would say education contributes 20% of my professional development, and sharing contributes 30% of it, and as you can see, reflection takes, the big figure, the big share. Reflection contributes 50% of my professional development. So I strongly recommend as teachers to constantly reflect, because that is the simplest and the easiest and the cheapest if you want to do for us to grow personally as well as professionally. And to draw the conclusions, I would like to invite my colleague Jimmy from Indonesia.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Douglas. So I hope you caught a little bit of that. I know his accent's quite difficult to understand at times, but he was talking about his Teachers Association, and they meet every 2 weeks on Saturday mornings, and they share their successes and failures. It's completely low resource. They don't need any other resources apart from themselves. They share what they've been doing in class, they share their lessons, they talk about what's been going on. And it's helped him, he says, to be a more reflective practitioner. And this is his profile, he says. His PD profile at the moment is 20% education and training, 30% sharing, and he says 50% reflection. So I just thought, just for a minute, it might be quite interesting for yourself to think what your PD profile is at the moment. What is it like Hinsa's, or is it a bit different? Have a little think, maybe chat to your partner for 1 minute. Actually, 10, I think. So what do you think? Put your hand up if yours is similar to Hinsa's. Oh, just a few similar. Put your hand up if it's totally different. Just a few as well. What are the rest of you doing? Yeah. Okay. So, so interesting to see how we develop and what kind of tools we use. And I think Hinsa's profile is particularly it is a very low resource context. And of course, we tend to use the things that we have around us to develop with, such as computers, etc. So we've talked about concrete and classroom-based CPD, and we've talked about sharing a bit. I now want to talk a little bit about challenging yourself. Going outside your comfort zone is a great way to develop, of course. And here's something that I ask my teachers to do, and something that I do for myself, actually. So very simple, 3 learning goals for the next 3 months, write them down and check on them. Couldn't be simpler. Some of them are easy to check off, and some of them are more difficult. So we need some smarter goals. So make sure that the goals are specific, measurable, agreed, realistic, time-bound, exciting, and recorded. The exciting is the one that many people forget. You know, you're not going to do something if it's not exciting for you. So very important to do that. For example, this year I did something that was exciting for me. I gave my first online conference presentation for British Council Turkey. And that was very exciting, and I learned a lot from it. So that's something that, again, outside your comfort zone, you can do. So giving a session for your colleagues, giving presentations online. Obviously, things like giving webinars, training up as teacher trainer, writing a blog. I know many of you here are bloggers. Writing an article, professional article. There are many things that we can do to challenge ourselves, and we can go on challenging ourselves. It's a very important aspect of CPD. So we've talked about the fact that our profession constantly confronts us with change and innovation, that we have to be cautious and critical and selective. Continuous professional development is an important way for us to empower ourselves and to gain confidence as practitioners. It enables us to make our own decisions. We've talked about taking responsibility for our own professional development and the choices we have available to us. Ultimately, though, I think professional development is about more than all that. It's about achieving our true potential. Achieving our true potential as practitioners, as professionals, and as human beings. So, what about the eagle? I totally forgot about that. Do you remember the eagle? Remember that we left him, didn't we, looking up at the eagle in the sky and saying, it's magnificent, so much power and grace. It's like poetry in motion. That's an eagle, said the chicken. That's the king of the birds. It's a bird of the air. But we're just chickens. We're birds of the earth. What's the ending of this story for the eagle? What's the ending of this story for the eagle? I think there are 2 possible endings. There's this one, or there's this one. Which one will you choose? I think so. Thank you. Okay.